So mayors, again, thank you again. It's a very early morning, but the last few weeks it's been a series of early mornings, more so too because of the COVID-19 impact it's had on your communities. I'm going to start with Mike Henry of Carbondale, just to kind of lead off with the first question I'll ask all of you. Just what are the budget impacts on your respective cities? Have there been layoffs, concerns for each of the communities involved? And Mayor Henry, I'll start with you.
Well, thank you. We are right. In fact, tonight we're holding our city council meeting for a public hearing on the budget to get public input, and then we will follow that with discussion among council members and staff about some proposed cuts that we have from staff. Right now, there are no furloughs planned, but I want to stress it's not off the table. It's certainly possible. So, never been in this situation before. We are anticipating having about a $2 million plus loss in revenue combined with our local taxes and state taxes. And that's on approximately a $25 million operating budget. So it's a significant thing to undertake. And we're going to have a really ambitious discussion about this to decide where we are. On April 28th, we'll pass a budget. I anticipate that no matter what we pass, we'll be making further adjustments as we go along in the coming months.
And Mayor Frattini, your response to that question?
Well, we're very similar to what Mayor Henry was saying there. We passed our budget last night, in fact, on things. And as always, when we go into that process, we're looking where to economize and get the best bang for a dollar all along. But due to the uncertainties, anyone's guess that we are kind of just going to hold with where we are currently, budget-wise, knowing that there's going to be some further reductions, which we anticipate to hit probably somewhere in June, maybe as late as July, before we start seeing that interruption in revenue or the cash flow on the thing. But we're figuring anywhere from 12 to 20% in that range, probably a revenue loss and budget cuts combined. We don't anticipate any furloughs, as Mayor Henry said, at this time, because we're down pretty much to basic and bare staffing as it is.
Okay, and then now I'm going to go over to Murfreesboro Mayor Will Stevens for his response.
Yeah, I think I can echo a lot of the things that Mayor Henry and Mayor Frattini just said. I expect whatever budgetary impacts we're going to have will come in June or July, and that's mostly because the sales tax revenue comes in several months late. And so we'll see what kind of impact we had as those revenues come in. And so much of this depends upon what the state does in terms of adjusting their revenues, because we are reliant upon the state for reimbursement when it comes to retail sales tax revenue and other taxes. So as they make adjustments, we'll have to adjust. We've not had to lay anybody off or furlough anyone at this point. I can't rule that out, but I don't necessarily at this point expect it. One thing that has been very measurable has been the video gaming revenue is about $10,000 a month for the city of Murfreesboro, and obviously those locations are closed, and so we expect that we're going to be off at least that much month over month. It will be very interesting to see, what it looks like when you have such a slowdown in your restaurants and bars, comparatively to perhaps increases at your other more traditional grocery style outlets. But of course, we get a much smaller percentage of the tax revenue on those sales of groceries than we do on other items. So at this point, just to summarize, I don't expect any layoffs or furloughs in Murfreesboro. I'd say that we'll see those budgetary impacts in midsummer. And at this point, I don't know exactly what percentage to put on them.
Thank you, Mayor Stevens. And Mayor Absher, you're next. I know you may echo some of this. You may not echo some of the things the other mayor said, because I know you've had to announce furloughs. So, Mayor Absher, just kind of what's your response to the question?
Well, not to repeat what the other gentleman just said, but the state does have they do have a 3-month delay from when taxes are collected and remitted by the merchants to when that is reported and remitted to the municipalities. And so what I hope is that the state can start to see the effect of that and give us some guidance, even though it still may be 2 or 3 months before we actually would get the monies. Surely they will know by the time the tax forms and the payments are remitted to them, that they'll have some idea as to what the impact is, what they're seeing, because they give us guidance on all kinds of other revenue streams, state income tax and things like that too. So I hope the one unique comment is that they can start to give us some guidance ahead of time, even though we don't normally get that in normal times. Surely they're going to be looking at it too, because it's their income stream as well, so that we would have some kind of heads up as to what we're facing. As far as the Marion, we did furlough some employees. Marion's situation is a little bit unique from some of the other towns, is that we have 4 facilities that we own and run in town, namely the Hub, the Pavilion, the Civic Center, and Boynton Street Community Center, all of which are, with some exception of Boynton Street, all of those are only there for paying patrons to go to, either to buy tickets to go to a show, in the case of the Civic Center and the Pavilion, or in the case of the Hub, obviously memberships, of which we have not been billing our members because they cannot use those facilities. And so in our case, our furloughs, with maybe only a couple of positions that were supporting those facilities, namely IT and one other position in the clerk's office here at City Hall, and a couple of water department people that take payments from the public. Again, City Hall is also closed. We just could not justify continuing paying those people that are only there for those facilities to run, for the general public to attend events at those. And so that's a big part of our employment here. It did not affect the street department or sewer or water, or other than the office, police or fire protection, those kinds of core services. But we felt it necessary to provide the taxpayers some relief, knowing that those facilities have to be closed by government decree right now, and we really don't have any kind of clue when that might be relieved. I think those facilities, among all others, will probably be slower to get back online once the governor reaches some sort of consensus and lifts any kinds of restrictions, whenever those may be. But in terms of the bigger budget pictures, I'd love to talk to Mayor Henry offline at some point, how you came to that number, because I don't know of any way to come to a number as to what this might impact our general budget. I've heard the state say somewhere they thought 20% would be their hit on revenues, even though that might be over a longer period of time, not necessarily just a month or 2, but maybe the whole year. So if that would be the case, we would be looking at more like a $4 or $5 million budget hole, if that information is correct. But the truth is, I don't think anyone knows. I don't know how any of us really could logically make good decisions about long-term budget impacts with the lack of information that we have. So I concur with the other mayors that said it's probably going to have to be a July timeframe, which will be, correct me if I'm wrong, mayors, but I think that'll be April's sales tax revenue that we would get in July. That's going to be the real first heads up we have as to really what the impact has been on this. And clearly we'll have to make some decisions then, but I would not want to be making long-term decisions on our employment base with lack of information. These furloughs that we have made, keep in mind, those employees are still keeping their benefits, including health insurance, and almost to a person of the 43 that we furloughed, they're pretty much whole between unemployment benefits that are available to them. So while it always is a kick in the shin and certainly unprecedented, we feel like they are certainly able to provide for their families at this point, even though we have no revenue from the facilities that they were manning before. So anyway, it is a wait and see demeanor, I think, until we get some sort of a heads up from the state as to what we can expect moving forward. I hope and pray by the end of April, we'll know what March's effect was, even though that was probably only a third to a half of the month at worst or at best. So April's going to be the real tell here, I think. And once maybe April's concluded, maybe by the end of May or something, the state can start to compile some data and give us all some sort of a clue as to what they see of our revenues being affected. And only then, I think, is it fair and logical to start making long-term decisions.
Thank you, Mayor Absher. And Mayor Robinson, I'll let you get some time to get your response on the budget impact it's had on Carterville.
Well, at this point, just like all the other mayors have said, all we can do at this point is make educated guesses, assumptions on how we believe this will impact us coming up in the future months. One of the things that I haven't heard any of the other mayors talk about yet is where the governor is allowing deferment of food service industry of their taxes during this time frame. So I'm trying to estimate what impact we'll have with no tax revenue from food service if they defer. I think I'm not sure how many will do that over the next, over March and April, and if this continues on. But based on that, I'm at doubling the percentage that Mayor Absher is using. I'm looking at the possibility of a 40% decrease. The city of Carterville relies pretty heavily on the food service industry and fuel. We don't have a lot of large retail. We're more service oriented as far as our business community. So I'm looking at a higher percentage, planning on that, hoping for something less of an impact overall. But that's where we're at right now. We are at a position where we're not furloughing or laying off at this point, but we also are not doing any hiring. We've limited overtime, and all purchases are being approved through the mayor's office. There were some standard purchases management could make, and those are all being deferred through the mayor's office during this period of time, just to try to be extra cautious on all expenditures. And simply because we don't know what's going to happen, we're preparing for the worst, hoping for the best.
All right, thank you, Mayor Robinson. And what are some ways that the city is helping its residents or its businesses, that you guys have been able to implement? And I will start with Mayor Steve Frattini from here.
Thank you. In trying to help our business community, which is one of the focuses at the current time, right after public safety and health, that is, that we started off by making sure that all of our food and beverage folks in those businesses, the bars, the restaurants, were aware of the lottery drawing on the grant program that was offered. As it turns out, I'm not aware of any in our community that was selected. I think there were 700s in the downstate area that were. But the other one is the downtown business stabilization program. We've promoted that very heavily within our business community to where they can take advantage there of some loss recovery, if you will, by way of grants to help them through these days ahead. We've had a moderate to good turnout at this point. I think we've had 11 or 12 different businesses that have actually submitted the grant application. This is where the city itself is actually the grant requestor, and we bundle with those, with our request as the grant applicant, the various businesses and submitting their needs as well. And then that process will go into a public hearing, which we have our first one on the 27th of this month. And then it goes forward by council action per applicant, resolution on each one, and then goes on for funding consideration. to the state at that point. So we think this can be a good tool for some of our businesses that choose to take advantage of it. And we also are providing the resource information for the various other opportunities, whether it be from U.S. Department of Agriculture, the Small Business Administration, the state itself, and Department of Commerce and Economic Opportunity. There's a number of different tools out there, and we're making it pretty much our focus to put that information out to our business community to see what best suits their needs and their abilities, and what the days ahead may hold for them.
Thank you, Mayor Frattini, and Mayor Will Stevens. Your response: what is what plans are there to help businesses and help residents in the community?
Well, a lot of the things that Mayor Frattini just said are things that we're doing in Murfreesboro also. In recent days, we've been helping to coordinate the application of the Downstate Business Stabilization Program grants. I think we've got about 12 or 13 businesses that qualified and that we are coordinating applications for, and we're going to be hosting our public hearing coming up soon as well. I've been posting daily updates every morning that share Illinois Department of Public Health information and other links to various programs and articles that highlight some of the more positive trends when it comes to seeing COVID curves flatten out or bend downward in the country and around the world. I think it's just been important for mayors, and I think all of the mayors in Southern Illinois have done a good job of this, to inform their residents, sort of assuage their fears, and just unite people around common causes like the mask making that we have seen. I know that there's a Carbondale Murfreesboro collaborative group on Facebook that's doing that, and so helping to facilitate communication of resources and elastic and fabric for those folks has been a part of it. Tonight at the Murfreesboro City Council meeting, we're going to consider repurposing about $38,000 that was in a revolving loan fund that was to be used for businesses over the years for to be able to do small improvements, and it just never has really taken off. There hasn't been very much participation in it, and so tonight the council is going to be considering a program that would allow Murfreesboro businesses inside city limits of Murfreesboro to essentially turn in a bill that they have paid since the first of the year until now, and we will then consider reimbursing them in that amount in a loan that'll be 90% forgivable. So we're working through the details of that. I'm going to have a conversation about it this evening to see if we can repurpose some of that money that was already in an account through a grant that was got a few years ago that hasn't really facilitated a lot of use. So those are some of the things we've been doing and some of the things that we hope to do moving forward to help our businesses and our residents to come through the other end of this thing more intact than they would have been otherwise.
Mayor Stevens and Mayor Robinson, what are some concerns from residents, and what has the city tried to do to help the community?
Well, besides the programs that the other mayors are speaking of, from a standpoint of the citizens, we've been partnering with the food pantry in town, and also having City Hall be a repository, because our food pantry has limited hours of operation, and it's all volunteer ran and driven. So we've used City Hall as a repository for food donations, monetary donations, and some of our City Hall employees have been partnering with the food pantry and individuals on getting food and necessities that those who are out of work or incapable of meeting their family's needs, we're assisting with that. And all those efforts are coordinated through City Hall. And we've encouraged people to contact City Hall if they have any needs or concerns that they're having difficulty meeting in their household. So we've done that as well. And I noticed yesterday that the details on Illinois Department of Human Services has released a free text line for those who are having stress or mental health problems related to COVID-19. And we posted that on our website and our social media outlets. And it also, you can put in keywords as far as unemployment or food or shelter to get details through that text line. So we push that out as well. And we're hopeful that we may, if the need arises, would be able to get some tips from the state, make its way back to us to help some of our citizens. But those are some of the efforts we're doing outside of assisting with the DCO grants and SBAs and working with our Chamber of Commerce to meet those needs of our businesses. We're trying to make sure that our residents are safe and helped as well.
Mayor Robertson and Mayor Henry, what's the city of Carbondale doing, and what are residents concerned most about from what you can tell?
Well, we start out very early with letting folks know that they wouldn't be penalized during this time period for late payment of water bills, trash pickup bills, and that sort of thing. There would be no late fees on that. We have a local food and beverage tax and a local packaged liquor tax that we rely heavily on for our funding. So we notified those businesses, obviously those are restaurants and packaged liquor stores, that they could defer their payment for 30 days of the collection of those taxes, which they've already collected. Interestingly enough, I'm in receipt of a petition that we should refund those taxes to those businesses. That's a very complicated question. And in fact, I've heard a lot from our citizens saying, I want you to refund the money to me. I paid it to the restaurant. So that's something council's going to have to discuss. Myself, I don't favor refunding it. There's a lot of good state and federal programs coming along. I think the tax is intended to be used for the benefit of all citizens of Carbondale, and we need to find some way to do that. And perhaps it can be all businesses in Carbondale, but I don't think just a specific few is a fair way to distribute that. We've also did fundraising for the St. Louis Food Pantry, and that sounds strange, but that pantry, we send $1,000 to them, and we will get $4,000 to $5,000 of food back from the St. Louis Food Pantry. So they've been keeping our places, our local pantries, well stocked. We also have an initiative that, God bless them, our city staff is, some of them are donating their income tax refund to local charities. Because they're saying, I don't really need that money from the IRS, and so they've started doing that all on their own, which I think is a very, very generous gesture in this time of need. Steve Mitchell's working very hard. He's our Director of Economic Development for our local businesses and helping them get through all these different applications of different, there's SBA loans, there's the downstate stabilization loan grant, and that sort of thing. So he spent a lot of time doing that, making sure people get their applications in as quickly as possible, and that they're filled out correctly so they don't get rejected.
All right, thank you, Mayor Henry. And Mayor Absher, I'll let you finish off this question. Just what has the city done to help residents and in the city, and what concerns have been brought to your attention?
I don't have enough time to answer that last part. The first thing that we did was participate in a meeting with the school district and making sure that they were equipped and able to continue to make and serve take-home meals for the district students that needed them. And I'm proud that as of this moment, now this hasn't been with city involvement necessarily, but the school district, which I've been very complimentary of, is currently serving about 4,300 take-home meals for their students. Another church in town that's also preparing take-home meals, somewhere in the neighborhood of 350, I think, or 400 for the weekend for those same kind of student population. We too have participated in the downstate stabilization grant with DCEO. We will have our first grant hearing of at least 2 will be this Friday afternoon, and those applications presumptively sent immediately. Like Mayor Henry was saying, we have waived late water fees and things like that, trying to be accommodative to the extent that we can be. There were some very energetic and visionary entrepreneurs in town that held a Marion United fundraising event, which was held, I believe, on April 3rd, and raised nearly $200,000 for our small businesses within inside of city limits that applied for some of that. And hopefully those funds will be getting out to those that were approved for those by the Southern Illinois Community Foundation that housed that. Hopefully those will be going out this week, if not very early next week. But the bigger part of, I think, my job has been, and it is what I find to be the most difficult, which really reaches the heart of, I think, what the intent of your question was, is trying to get out the right information to our constituents, and more frequently, as of late, especially with the confusion that is around what you interviewed me about, and I think some others about, Danny, yesterday, about the governor's announcement of hotel rooms being available that the state has contracted for, is trying to fight the disinformation proliferance that there is out there right now. We have a lot of understandably concerned, if not downright scared residents. And that I find to be the most difficult part of maybe not difficult, but maybe the most time consuming part of the job, is just trying to talk to people about what's real, what's not real. We all have this, I believe we are hardwired since we were little kids. When we're in a dark room, a vacuum of information, we have always imagined that monster under the bed since we were kids. And I think, using that analogy, when there's a lack of information and concern and fear, as there is in this situation, just a lot of people imagine monsters under the bed that simply, it's just not real. It doesn't exist. And so that's another big part of what my job is, I feel, at this point, and I presume to some extent the other mayors, is just trying to talk to people about what's real and what's not, and what their expectations should be moving forward.
And let me follow up on that, Mayor Absher, before I move on. We talked about it yesterday in our interviews about, Marion and also Carbondale, and Mayor Henry, I'll get to you in just a second, about those cities being as facilities where hotel rooms would be in use for COVID-19 patients. You told me yesterday that there was no such agreement that you had known of, or that, as far as you knew, that was in place for it. Have you found out more about it? And, has the state been as transparent as it could be? Mayor, can you hear me?
Sorry, I was muted. So that was a question for Mayor Henry?
For Mayor Absher.
Okay, that's what I thought.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't.
No worries.
It is for me?
Yes.
Okay. This morning, as a matter of fact, I sent a letter to, the answer is no. I still do not have the information. I have been assured verbally that the intent of this is not for, literally, I think the way it was put to me, Cook County residents that are infected to be utilizing these rooms, but that's literally just been a verbal assurance. I, this morning, sent a letter to the governor's office and copied our state senator and representative, just so that they had knowledge of this, asking for the terms of what this arrangement is, who negotiated it, and who's supposed to be using these rooms. And I asked for that in writing from the governor's office. I think, it's very, here again, you just announce, and I have to say, I've been heretofore very supportive of the governor and his team in what they have, how they've handled this crisis for the most part. I may not agree with all the things that they've done, but I've been very complimentary on the leadership that they have shown. This is an exception to that. I don't believe it has been transparent. I was totally caught off guard, as I know at minimum Mayor Lewis in Mount Vernon was, to whom I spoke yesterday. And I presume Mayor Henry probably the same way, although I have not spoken to him about it. I think we were all caught off guard, and it's very concerning when you hear something like that announced on a press conference on late in the week, and we still Today is Tuesday. It's 4 or 5 days after that announcement was made. I still don't understand nor have been looped in on what this is. My latest information is that the Illinois Department of Public Health negotiated these, but I haven't seen it. I don't know what it says. I don't know what it's supposed to be used for. And my plea to the governor's office is that I have constituents to be accounted to. That's my job, and I believe in this circumstance that we're at least due an explanation in writing as to what this is and what it's supposed to be used for.
And Mayor Henry, we talked a little bit on the phone yesterday. We talked about that the state sent down some officials to kind of scout locations in Belleville and Carbondale to see, which facilities would be able to take part in this program. And Mayor Henry, have you heard back from state officials about about the hotel talks, and do you share the same feelings as Mayor Absher does?
I do share Mayor Absher's same concerns and feelings about this. We're real short on information. The Army Corps of Engineers was here in Carbondale last week, maybe the end of the week before, and toured some buildings here. They told us they were also going to look at Marion, as well as Edwardsville and some of our Metro East cities up there. But again, we were real short on the information as to what the intent was. The sense that I got was they are here. This is a just in case scenario. If we need hospital beds, my impression initially was that it would be for expansion of hospital facilities for people down here, because they were looking throughout the state for this kind of thing. But again, these are just sort of vague impressions from very brief conversations. And I agree with Mayor Absher. The governor needs to get us a lot more information on this. It does concern our citizens. If we are bringing folks with the virus down here, we need to know who's going to run these facilities, if it's going to be someone like Southern Illinois Healthcare or one of our other large healthcare providers, or if it's going to be an outside provider. There's a lot of information that we need, and I have made the same request to Governor Pritzker, and I would echo that I do value his leadership in this, and I think the state's done a great job of getting information out to folks like us as well as the citizens. But these kinds of rumors just cause people to panic, and we need to get on top of it right away.
Thank you, Mayor Henry. And I know you and Mayor Absher are both in the unique positions of being mentioned specifically as cities, in part of that program. And, as far as the other mayors, I'll start with Mayor Frattini. Have you been in touch with state officials just on getting advice on what the is, or any of the state representatives or state senators to them?
Not to this topic, Danny, in that we only have like 2 bed and breakfasts in town. So we're not going to be impacted potentially like Carbondale or Marion that has many rooms available. So we're kind of limited in that market. We've got 2 bed and breakfasts in town, and that's our only overnight lodging that's available. We are in touch on a daily basis with our hospital administrator here in town and through SIH as well. And we're just feel as though we are as prepared to deal with whatever the unknown is coming as we can be at this time. There are provisions for additional confinement rooms, if you will, within the hospital campus here in town. So I think that we, for our local population at least, is as prepared as we can be. We've not been contacted by the state or anyone related to overflow type of facilities due to our lack of rooms.
Okay, and Mayor Robinson, your response.
Yeah, within the city limits of Carter Carterville, we don't have any rooms, so we haven't been contacted, and it's really not much of an issue for us operationally. Of course, I am interested in hearing more when Mayor Absher gets a response from the governor's office, or Mayor Henry does. I'm certainly interested just for our region and the 13 corridor, but operationally, it doesn't have much of an impact on Carterville at this time.
And Mayor Stevens, Murfreesboro, is it the same on your end?
In regard to that particular issue, yes, we do have America's Best Value in Murfreesboro, just east of town, across the river. But I haven't paid particularly close attention to that issue because I know the other communities were the ones that were specifically named, and I know that's created a challenge for them in order to try to get that information. But in terms of working with the governor's office, I have been in contact with them on other issues, specifically trying to ferret out information regarding the Department of Employment Security. Been in touch with a couple of deputy governors and state reps and state senators about how to best advise those folks who are trying to get through to these various programs. So I haven't really coordinated with them on the hotel issue, but on a few other issues I have, and I've been satisfied with the response that I've gotten from the governor's office.
Thank you, Mayor Stevens. And a couple more questions, and then we'll get to the rest of the day here. You know, obviously the CARES Act has been signed. You know, federal dollars coming to help people affected by COVID-19. And I'll start with Mayor Henry. Have you seen any CARES Act dollars come into Carbondale?
To my knowledge, no, we haven't seen that happen yet. Still waiting to figure out exactly what it's going to be and what the amounts are going to be. You know, something I didn't mention before, significant to unique to us, is we have Southern Illinois University here, and those students are gone. There's only about 400 students left on campus. They didn't return from spring break, and that is what's having a significant impact on our sales tax revenue. Again, that food and beverage tax and packaged liquor tax. But to your question, no, I haven't heard anything about that.
Mayor Absher, has any CARES Act dollars come to Marion?
If they have, not that I'm aware of. And interestingly, I'm glad you brought this up. Should be one of the main concerns of all of us on this phone call, and I'm hopeful that you guys maybe have more information than I do about it. But the CARES Act, as I understand it, earmarked a certain amount of money, significant amount of money for the states, and within those states, there was a portion, 45% of it, if I remember right, of federal dollars going to the states that was earmarked in that legislation, the way I read it, for cities with populations greater than 500,000. On the state of Illinois, that only includes one that I can count, and that's, of course, Chicago. And I know that the Illinois Municipal League, with Brad Cole as its head, which you should be familiar with well in Carbondale, as the former mayor, is fighting for that to be, those funds and any future funds that might be passed on to the states, to be allocated on a per capita basis, which would be, in my opinion, the only fair, equitable way to pass those funds through to cities and counties. I hope and pray that's just an error in intent and or wording of that legislation. But from the city and county standpoint, that's what I think we all either are already or should be on pins and needles and lobbying for that relief to not just go to Chicago. That, to me, would present the very worst of what all of us in Southern Illinois sometimes feel, as far as Chicago getting, basically more than their fair share. In what's always been said, this would be a terrible outcome of the allocation of those funds. That being said, I don't know that the federal legislation, the way I read it, gives the state any leeway to do anything differently than what it said. So that, yet again, is all something. It's not the most important thing right now. All of us are concerned about the welfare and safety of our residents, as we should be. But as we move down, this, I hope, is past the peak and what I call the downside of this roller coaster to where we're coming back down more towards normal. This issue and many others like it are going to have to be addressed. It's simply not if I did the math right, something in the tune of that federal money in the CARES Act was in greater than $4 billion, billion with a B, would be going to Chicago alone. That's not fair. That should be in all rights. It's not like any of our towns haven't experienced the same drop off in revenue, although I grant that Chicago's obviously had more than their fair share of sickness, but I don't think these funds were intended to combat the sickness as much as they were the economic shock. And clearly other towns other than Chicago, Illinois have had an economic shock. So that's what I'm very interested to see how that plays out in the next 2 or 3 months, and interested to know if the other mayors might have any more input or had any knowledge of that issue that I don't have benefit of.
And Mayor Frattini, since you're on my screen, I'll give you the floor next. Have you received any CARES money? Has the city have received any money, and what can it be used for?
None that we are aware of, and I will echo what Mayor Absher said there on the proportioning of that. And I know the Municipal League has been an advocate trying to get this on a per capita basis, which I share with Mayor Absher's opinion on that too. That's really the only fair and equitable way of dispersing those funds. But at this time, we've not seen any activity whatsoever of disbursements.
And Mayor Robinson, I would assume that you haven't seen any of that money either. Mayor Robinson, you still there?
Are you asking me?
Yes. Yeah.
Yes. I'm sorry, the signal broke up for a minute.
Oh, no worries.
I'm in the same boat with the rest of the mayors. I've yet to see or hear anything, but I agree with them wholeheartedly about the per capita distribution versus anytime you read in the Illinois Municipal Handbook, all the rules are written for every municipality unless they're $1 million or less or $500,000 or less. So there's always carve-outs, but I'd like for this to be a little more equally distributed throughout the entire state.
And Mayor Stevens, your response, what can this CARES Act money do for your community?
Well, the CARES Act money, I think, in the way that it's going to help my community is going to be through those individual checks that we're seeing coming into people's pockets. I think here in Illinois, they're supposed to start hitting pretty heavily starting tomorrow, from what I understand. And so seeing that money go into people's pockets here in my community will help to stabilize individuals. And when individuals are stable, then your community is inherently more stable to some extent. I haven't seen, of course, any of that CARES Act money that the other mayors were talking about in terms of direct payments to the municipalities. And I echo everything that they say about the apportionment and the way that the legislation is written. And I know the Municipal League is lobbying effectively and diligently on all of our behalves.
And, I'll leave you guys off just to give your final remarks on this before we cut the stream. And Mayor Stevens, I'll let you start off. Just, what more can you say that we haven't covered? And, what's your message to residents who are still struggling through this pandemic?
Well, people need to realize, and it's become cliche, but that we're going to get through this and we're going to learn lessons from it. And we're going to be better prepared for things that would come in the future as a community and as a region. This has drawn many of us more closely together, not in obviously a physical sense, but in a sense of communication with various other elected officials and mayors. And I appreciate the feedback that I've gotten from my other colleagues who are in this position that we are all in as mayors of communities. I've been extremely encouraged by the outpouring of support for SIH and for healthcare workers and the masks that have been made, seeing the money raised over in Marion, the $200,000. that's a perfect example of the strength of Southern Illinois. And I'm confident that we're going to, continue to celebrate our shared values as communities. And when this is all said and done, we're going to have a hell of a good party.
Mayor Robinson, your final remarks.
Well, I just, that's a hard act to follow from Mayor Stevens right there. But, I think that what I've tried to do throughout this process is try to maintain city services and maintain as much as possible while still protecting our employees. But I want to try to maintain a level of normalcy to some degree. When everybody goes to work or goes to the store, anywhere in their travels, even though they're limited, things are very different. And I want to try to keep home when they come home as normal as possible. And it's difficult to do, but that's been my goal throughout the entire thing is, the health, welfare, and safety, but also to maintain a level of normalcy and taking care of ourselves and watching out for our neighbors. And just like Mayor Stevens said, we will get through this. And when we do, we can crank it up a notch and have some fun again and get back to normal.
Mayor Frattini?
Well, I can only echo what Mayor Stevens and Robinson have said. And we've been trying to maintain as near normal an activity and mentality as we possibly can as a community. And as a region, we've had our trials and tribulations through the years, but more specifically as a community here in Heron, in our 120-year history, we've had a lot of things to overcome. Everything from the decline in the mining industry from back in the early days of our community to our industrial decline and so forth like that. And we are a very resilient community. We have overcome those setbacks through the years. And I think with everyone moving in the same positive direction, that we will overcome the COVID-19 situation that we're facing today. And I think a lot of our ways of doing business, perhaps, and how we view one another and reaching out to one another, I think there's going to be some positive impacts for all this. And we look forward to those days and encourage our community and the region to maintain that positive disposition. And let's look for the days ahead.
Mayor Henry, any final thoughts or anything we may have missed or not covered during our conversation? It may have been his signal may have broke up. So.
I'm sorry.
Oh, there you are.
I'm back.
I was just saying what your final remarks are, and on moving forward, on combating COVID-19.
Yeah, I want to encourage all of our citizens to stay the course, shelter in place, stop socializing. We still have a lot of folks having parties and things of that sort. That's the fastest way to spread this disease. I want to commend our houses of worship this past weekend for finding ways to allow folks to worship safely. Many of them did drive-in type worship services, had people bring their own communion materials. And I spoke with probably 6 or 7 of them, and they did a really great job of keeping people safe and still allowing them to worship, which we all need in this time of crisis. So we will get through this. We just need to stay the course and be as positive as we can be.
Mayor Absher, I'll let you wrap up this discussion with your final remarks on this conversation or anything that we missed.
Well, it's hard to not repeat some of the things that my colleagues have already said, but I'm sure they feel this about their own communities. But I've only been in office 51 weeks, so all these guys have a whole lot more tenure than I do, and so I'm kind of new to the job in general, much less navigating a situation like this. But I have been so encouraged and so impressed by the people of Marion, and really I extend that to all the people of Southern Illinois, and I want to thank them for that. I do believe, and I'm not just saying this to be an optimist, I do believe we are, if we're not yet on the downside of this roller coaster, as I described, we are kind of at the top of the hill. I think we're going to start heading back to normal at some point soon, although no one knows how quickly that will come. So my encouragement to everybody is, like my colleague said, stay the course. Going to Walmart 6 and 7 at a time, or Rural King, or any other place is just simply not in your best interest right now. That is where this can be spread, and that's exactly what we don't want to happen right now. We've only got a little bit left of this, I believe. Let's do the right thing. And then lastly, I just want to say to my colleagues, especially having been the new guy on the blog, I appreciate each and every one of you. I know that I have and can call each one of you, and that happened many times over this past year, much less just these last few weeks. And so I appreciate all of you lending a hand to the new guy and giving me some great advice and help. And I hope you all know that is always going to be reciprocated. And in that light, think of how far we've come just in that world over the past year, or in these past few months. We're working together as towns much better than we ever had before. We know that we're in it together. We need each other. And I think that extends to all of our constituency. So if there's a positive thing to come out of all this and all this disruption, I think we all are going to have a much greater appreciation for our relationships, for our livelihoods, for our liberties, and for our pursuits of happiness. And I think we'll all be better for all that in the end.
All right, thank you, Mayor Absher, and thank you to all 5 mayors, Mayors Henry, Robinson, Frattini, Absher, and Stevens for doing this Zoom call. I know there's a lot on your guys' plates with everything going on with this pandemic, but